So the moment you feel unhappy, the moment you feel suffering, the moment you feel fear, now your body's in the past. So it's the thought being the language of the brain and the feeling being the language of the body, and how we think and how we feel creates our state of being. So many people reaffirm their state of being completely by the past. And so it only takes a thought and a feeling, an image and emotion, a stimulus and response to start the conditioning process. So we start to condition the brain and body, hardwire the brain, condition the body emotionally into the past. The problem is the body's so objective that it doesn't know the difference between the real life experience that's creating the emotion and the emotion we're creating by memory alone. The body's believing it's living in the same past environment 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Well, I think the greatest habit we have to break is the habit of being ourselves, because, we think 60 to 70,000 thoughts in one day, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts as the day before. Well, if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, if you're thinking the same way, your life is going to stay the same way, because the same thoughts lead to the same choices. The same choices lead to the same behaviors. The same behaviors create the same experiences, but the same experiences produce the same feelings and the same emotions, and those same feelings and emotions drive our very same thoughts. Now here's the problem. Our biology, our neurocircuitry, our neurochemistry, our hormones, and even our gene expression stays the same because we're the same. So the payoff from a habit is the feeling. You drink the coffee because it gives you an arousal, it gives you a rush of energy, it gives you something, and you say, wow, you don't say this consciously, something in my outer environment changed my internal state. And the moment you notice a change in your internal state and you pay attention to what caused it, the next time you feel uncomfortable, the next time you feel tired, the next time you feel lazy, your brain creates the image of exactly what you want, and that's how we become conditioned to different things. So when we break a habit, as you know, the body craves the feeling, craves the chemical stimulation. And so in order to overcome a habit, you have to be conscious. Hardest part of any process of change is not making the same choices you did the day before. And that takes an incredible amount of energy and an incredible amount of awareness. So everybody's done this. There's no mystery to this. Every single person has done something great in their life. And normally when they do something great, the first step, and we've studied thousands and thousands of people in the process of change and transformation, even when they've healed themselves from really serious health conditions, they will tell you the moment they decided to make up their mind to change. They make a decision with such firm intention that the amplitude of that decision carries a level of energy that's greater than the hardwired programs in their brain and the emotional conditioning in their body. And their body is responding to their mind. In other words, the choice that they're making becomes a moment in time that they never forget. And so all they did was they married a clear intention, a thought of a new possibility in the future, and then they married it with an elevated emotion, whether it was inspiration, whether it was passion, whether it was invincibility. When you combine those two things, you begin to condition the brain and body into a future instead of the past. So most people say, I'm going to change tomorrow, and they're on the couch with the remote control, watching TV, they have their cell phone, their computer, their iPad, and they say, I think I'll change tomorrow, and the body never gets a signal. So most people who have trauma, as an example, the stronger the emotion that we feel from some experience in our life, the more altered we feel inside of us, the more the brain freezes a frame and takes a snapshot, and that's called a long-term memory. And then people think neurologically within the circuits of that experience, chemically within the boundaries of that emotion, and every time they recall the event, they're producing the same chemistry in their brain and body as if it was occurring. So can you then begin to do the exact same thing and have it work in an instrumental way? So the stronger the emotion that you feel when you make that decision, the more you remember the choice, and that's a long-term memory. And that's a big explosion in the quantum field. So if we could say it another way, you're giving your body a taste of the future emotionally. The body's believing it's in a new environment because it doesn't know the difference between the experience that creates the emotion that you're creating by that choice. So when a person feels that exuberance, that passion, to make up their mind to change, they'll say to you, I remember the exact moment I made up my mind to change. At this particular time, I was in my kitchen, it was this day, I can tell you everything about it because it's a long-term memory. So what if you did that every day? What if you could do that enough times that you literally, from a biological standpoint, begin to erase the emotion that's been stored in the body that produced the pain or the fear or the confusion, and now you're conditioning the body to an elevated emotion like gratitude or love. So we've studied this. When you feel passion, when you feel love, when you feel compassion, when you feel inspiration, when you feel gratitude, you feel appreciation, when you feel true care and kindness, the heart does something so beautiful. It starts to beat in a very rhythmic fashion, like beating a great drum. And that kind of consistent, coherent beat produces a magnetic field that's up to 3 meters wide. Now, the heart is emanating energy and frequency carries information. Now, getting the brain to work in a coherent way, we've kind of demystified the process. So coherence is order. Coherence is a cadence, it's a rhythm. And when the brain is coherent, it can send a signal out. It's a directive. It is the electrical charge in the quantum field. The feeling, that the elevated emotion of gratitude or love is the magnetic charge. So that's what draws experiences back to us. And so if you do that enough time with brain coherence and heart coherence, you got a Wi-Fi signal. And you begin to produce outcomes in your life. And when you start seeing synchronicities, serendipities, coincidences, opportunities showing up in your life, and you feel the feeling like, oh my God, the universe is responding to me, all of a sudden you stop believing unconsciously that you're the victim of your life, and you start believing that you're the creator of your life. And when you do that, then it inspires you to do it again because you don't want the magic to end. Now, the problem is that most people, that 70% of the time, if they're living by the hormones of stress, and living in stress is living in survival, when we're in that state where we feel threatened, we're in that state where we feel out of balance, because stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of homeostasis, we try to control everything in our life, we try to predict everything in our life, we try to force outcomes. And the act of shifting our attention when we're aroused by the hormones of stress, from one person to another meeting, to another problem, to another thing, to another place, every one of those elements has a neurological network in the brain. So the arousal of the stress hormone says, pay attention, there's danger in your outer environment, and make sure you can predict everything. So as you shift your attention to all these elements, like a lightning storm in the brain starts to fire very incoherently. It starts to fire out of order. When the brain's incoherent, we're incoherent. So we lost our Wi-Fi signal. We don't have a signal to send out. At the same time, if you're feeling the arousal of stress hormones and you can't run, you can't fight, you can't hide, you're stepping on the gas and you're stepping on the brake at the same time, the heart is pounding and beating, but it's beating against the closed system. So the heart starts beating out of order, and the interference of energy that's incoherent causes energy to drop in the brain and the heart. And when that occurs, you lose your other part of your Wi-Fi signal. In a sense, you feel separate. You feel like you got to do it by yourself. You feel separate from your dreams, separate from people in your life, because in survival and stress, it's not a time to open your heart. It's not a time to be compassionate. It's not a time to give. It's not a time to even learn. It's a time to run, fight, and hide. So 70% of the time, people spend their life living in survival, and no organism in nature can live in that state for an extended period of time. So if you teach people then that the long-term effects of the hormones of stress push the genetic buttons that create disease, and you say, all that anger that you feel, all that hatred that you feel, all that frustration that you feel is affecting nobody else but yourself and your own body. When people start to realize that that arousal gives them a rush of energy, and in time they need that rush of energy to feel something, and you teach them how to break the addiction from those those hormones. Just like you overcame coffee, it's the same thing. When you free your body from the chains of those emotions, when you look back at your past, you don't see it from the same place because it's only the emotion that keeps you connected to the past. Overcome the emotion. When you look back at your past, you see the wisdom behind it. You see the lessons behind it. You're seeing it from a greater level of consciousness. So when we combine a clear intention with an elevated emotion, we practice this way of creating brain and heart coherence. In time now, you start seeing things come to you. And that's the cool part. Now you no longer have to go and get it. Somehow, those opportunities start showing up in your life. And that's when, again, when you start believing that we're creating our lives instead of being victims to them.